Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. Today we're getting back to set 17 Ultimate Squad reveals, and today we'll be talking about the green pure cooler archetype. Man, I really hope I can avoid cooler puns because that'll be real annoying. But anyways, if you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And if you guys want to help support the channel, many ways down in the description you can do as always. But today, guys, if you're looking for custom sleeves, playmats, any TCG accessories like that, use my link in the description to yourplaymat.com. Not only will that link get you 10% off your order, but their art sleeves are of such high quality, guys. I always rave about them. I love the fact they don't peel. They're super firm. I absolutely love them. 10% off with the link in the description. Anyways, let's get into this talking about the leader first. We have the cooler leader. Auto, add one card from life to hand. When this card attacks, you may draw one card. If you don't, play it to one green unison with a specified cost of one from your hand with a marker on it. So first things first, I wish taking a life was optional, but it's not. That's still okay. I've actually been playing this deck quite a lot. I'll talk about that a little bit more, I guess, as we go through the video, talk about more of the cards. But I mean, you got to draw immediate comparisons between this and the yellow Goku leader coming out in set 17 because they're both like super unison reliant decks. Now this leader, as opposed to Goku, just plays a unison from your hand at the cost of drawing a card if you don't want to do that, whereas the Goku leader doesn't allow you to draw a card. You got to look at the top 5 and potentially play a unison, and you can miss on that. This guy can't miss. You either play a unison or you draw. That's already a big buff. I kind of assume they did this on purpose to make Cooler stronger, even though they're very similar decks. I mean, they got to know at this point that green has been very lackluster for several sets, so it wouldn't be surprising to me if they designed this on purpose with that in mind. You know, let's make this the stronger pure unison deck as opposed to yellow, which has been very strong for several sets. Anyways, moving along, auto once per turn, one of your green unison cards is placed in your drop area, draw one card. This is a very cool effect. I like this a lot. This is obviously one of the main reasons to play this deck and cycle through unisons, but just know that your hand size is never going to be like Icarus levels or Mecha Frieza levels. Basically, it's just comparing to these types of decks that draw an insane amount. This is an additional draw effect, and whenever leaders have this, we oftentimes just kind of think that the leader is going to have an insane 15 card hand size. Oftentimes your unisons are going to break even, not actually plus very hard, but it's still a very powerful effect. I just wanted to let you guys know from my experience that that's been my experience. Not these crazy big hands, but you know, it's nice that you're able to recycle, or I guess cycle through your deck whenever you play a new unison. Anyways, awaken at 4 or less, untap one, draw one. On the awaken side, when this card attacks, you may draw a card. If you don't, play a green unison from your hand with a marker on it. And just talking about this effect again, I'll be honest, I very rarely play the unison by this effect. I normally draw the card unless I really need to save the energy for something else. That's definitely a possibility, but just my experience with the deck again. Anyways, auto once per turn, and one of your green unison cards placed in the drop, draw a card, activate battle, discard one green unison card from your hand, choose this card up to one of your green unison cards, and it gets plus 5,000 power for the battle. So very interesting that we're getting the Dark Broly effect here. Notice though, you can't like combo unison from board. That's one downside this has compared to Dark Broly, but I mean, all your unisons in this deck are 5k combo power once you're awakened, which is very powerful. Very good effect. Makes playing a ton of unisons not really that much of a drawback because you can at least always defend your leader with them if you have to. Now we start with some of the lackey unisons for the deck. We have Dore Cooler's Armored Squadron. We have a 1-drop 5k unison and Power Green 2, which they all share. Auto, this card has 3 or more markers on it. When this card's played, add up to one cooler card with energy cost of 1 to your hand from your deck, then shuffle your deck. So this is one of the unisons that you can actually use to plus. So if you play this over a different unison, your leader will draw a card. This will search, so you will actually, you know, net some hand advantage, which is pretty cool. And then +1 activate main. This card gets plus 10,000 power for the turn, making it a 15k threat, which is always really nice. And this deck can very much be like a 1-drop 15k spam. And I mentioned in the Metacooler video that, you know, we're tired of seeing 1-drop 15k spam, but it's a bit different when it all comes from your unisons because this runs into slightly less issues, mostly like robotic riposte issues. You know, you can attack with your unisons, not having to rest a ton of cards, which is pretty nice. Salsa, though, is an absolutely insane card. This honestly probably should have been an SR. Anyways, Salsa and Power Green 2, counterplay, play this card with a marker on it. Auto, if your leader card is a green Frieza Clan card, and this card has 3 or more markers on it. When this card's played, choose one of your opponent's battle cards with an energy cost of 7 or less and KO it. Activate main +1. This card gets plus 5,000 power for the turn. So, with that in mind, Cooler inherently has access to 2 copies of, or 2 effects of Charismatic Villain per turn. Counterplay with this, pop something 7 or less. This costs you 1, but your next activation of Charismatic Villain, which of course you'll play 4 copies of, is going to pop another 7 or less. Like, that just leads to so much interruption. It's actually insane. Some decks, or at least from my testing of the deck, cannot play around this. Like, it is that insane. It's so there are some decks though, granted, that play some barrier battle cards that play bigger than 7 drops sometimes, but I mean, against like a vast majority of decks, this is an absolutely insane effect. Knees, Coolers, Armored Squadron. We have a 1-drop 4K Unison, Empower, Counterattack, negate the attack and play this card with a marker on it. Auto, if this card has 3 or more markers on it. When this card's played, choose one of your opponent's battle cards and it can't attack until the end of your opponent's next turn. This comes up sometimes. It's kind of like one of those yellow types of cards where your opponent has to play into it to get the most value out of it, but I mean, it's still good. Just being a 1-drop counterattack that, you know, draws a card whenever you replace the Unison you already had is always great. And then activate main +2. This card gets plus 6,000 power for the turn, making it a real good starter for a lot of your Empower cards. But there's a really good starter we'll talk about in just a little bit. But anyways, let's move on. Next up, we have Cooler, Mightiest Sibling in Space. We have a 1-drop. When this card's played, look at top 5 cards of your deck, add up to 1 green Unison card with a specified cost of 3 or less among them to your hand, and then shuffle your deck. So it is our archetype searcher, and it searches just about every Unison we could play and then some, which is cool. So you can actually dip into, you know, other techie Unisons, which is a pretty neat thing about this deck. Anyways, auto once per turn, one of your green Unison cards is placed in your drop area. Add 1 card from your light to hand, then this card gains plus 11,000 power for the turn. I really, really like this. This is a, you know, your typical 1-drop 15k attacker. We've had a million of these. You know, attack, take a life, gain 11k, or gain 10k in double strike, 10k critical, all this kind of stuff. We have a million of those in the game, but this is a really, really neat one and unique one because you don't have to take a life first of all, but you can do it if it gets you awakened or if you just need more resources in your hand. And it also has a different condition that is very easy to fulfill in this deck. Whenever you play a new Unison and place one Unison in the drop area, you get to give this guy a 11k boost. And actually, during your opponent's turn, whenever you're counterplaying with Salsa or negating with Knees, you get to do the same thing, boost him up. So now if he's a 4k in rest mode, he's a 15k, a little bit harder for your opponent to deal with. I mean, he's a 1-drop, probably getting killed by any number of effects, but just a relevant thing to know. Then we have 2 SRs for the deck, both in the form of Frieza Galactic Dynasty. 1-drop 10k Unison and Power Green for 3, so this one actually gains more markers than the rest. Permanent, well, this card has 3 or fewer markers on it, it can't attack, auto limit 1. If this card has 3 or more markers on it, when this card's played, your opponent discards 1 card from their hand. Activate main +1. This card gets plus 10,000 power for the battle. So you never want to start with this guy because he can't attack with 3 or fewer markers, and he has the effect of, when he's played basically with Empower, you get to make your opponent pitch a card. So you always want to go into this guy in the mid game, but man, this guy is an absolute powerhouse. 1-drop, pitch a card, your opponent has to deal with 20k attack. It's very, very good. Then we have the boss monster for the deck in the form of a Unison, Golden Frieza Newfound Might. 3-drop 20k, Empower Green 4, dual attack blocker, counter attack. Play this card with 3 markers on it. Keep in mind, it does not negate the attack that you counter, and I don't think you can block either, because if I'm not mistaken, the trigger window for blocker has already been missed because blocker has to see the card attacking in order to block, if that makes sense. But I mean, the next effect kind of solves that in a way. If this card has 4 more markers on it, when this card's played, choose all your opponent's battle cards and KO them. So if your opponent's attacking with a non-barrier battle card, you counterattack with this, you're KOing that card and essentially negating that attack, right? Which is very powerful. I will say, like, this deck does have some problems with barrier heavy decks, like namely Yellow Trunks from set 16 and the new Piccolo deck coming out in set 17. It's just really hard to deal with barrier cards, at least with the main core cards this deck comes with. I do wish that if I was negating an attack for 3, I could maybe KO some barrier. I mean, like, maybe there could be a stipulation, like, if it has 4 or more markers, KO everything. If you play it with 6 or more markers, KO everything ignoring barrier. It is actually pretty easy to counterattack and give this guy the full Empower 4. But yeah, I just wish that, you know, we got a little bit more bang for our buck by removing some barrier, at least within the archetype. But there are plenty of other cards you can tech to deal with that. Just one of my main gripes with it. But anyways, activate main -4. This card gets plus 10,000 power and triple strike for the turn. And then switch the card to active mode at the end of the turn, so it's back to being a blocker if you don't kill your opponent. But basically, it is a dual attack triple striker that again restands end of turn to block if you need it. These cards, all very, very good. And we have one more slide of cards, but firstly I want to talk about Demigra because it's a really old card. And wow, at this point, at the release of set 17, it'll be 7 sets old, I guess. This card, incredibly insane in this deck. I probably don't have to tell you this if you've played any amount of green in the past, Unison Warrior block, but this is probably the best starter Unison to play in this deck because it pluses 1, and your opponent can't really take markers off of it unless you let them, right? You're just going to take those lives instead of losing the markers, and then you can start your Empower chain, and then your Unisons are always going to have way too many markers for your opponent to deal with, typically, from my experience. Anyways, Cooler's Armored Squadron, 1-drop, activate main, limit 1. If your leader card is a Cooler card, look at top 7 cards of your deck, then choose 1, play up to 1 green Unison with a specified cost of 1, and Empower among them with a marker on it. then shuffle your deck, or play up to 1 green cooler with energy cost of 2 or less among them, then shuffle your deck. So there is a skillless cooler that's 2-drop, and there is a 2-drop cooler super combo, all of which are valid targets for this effect, as well as the 1-drop cooler we saw before. I do like this card. Main thing is, though, probably not going to play it, mostly because it's an extra card in a deck full of unisons, and yes, your unisons can combo. That is nice, but it doesn't let you play Demigod Unison, which is a big drawback. And we're only, I mean, I don't know, you're probably not going to play Cooler Super Combo because there's Paragus in the game, and you're probably not going to play the Vanilla Cooler, so like, this card seems a lot worse because of that. If this card could play Demigod, I would actually strongly consider it, but because it can't, not the best in my book, but still a cool card nonetheless that they printed. Anyways, Cooler, Sibling, Cruelty, 4-drop, 20k, Double Strike, permanent. For each green unison card in your drop area, reduce energy cost of this card in your hand by 1. Auto when this card's played. You can't play copies of this card for the turn. Additionally, you may place 1 green unison card at a specified cost of 3 or less from your drop area at the bottom of your deck. If you do, your opponent discards 1 card from their hand. Very good card. I mean, majority of the time it's going to be a 1-drop, make your opponent pitch 1, then, you know, swing for Double Strike. That's really, really good. We've seen a couple cards like this now where it's like, you know, 1-drop, discard 1, you know, kind of complementing rebrands, discard, draw 2 if you choose to play that card in the deck. But anyways, I mean, firstly, I wonder how many times I said that's cooler, that's cool, in reference to the cards in the cooler deck. I mean, of course, that's going to sound corny, but anyways, giving my thoughts on this deck, right? If you guys saw the Meta Cooler video from, I think it was Monday, I did mention at the end of the video that I was playing around with Green Cooler and that I was actually pretty unimpressed, even though on initial read, all the cards seemed pretty good. And now my opinion is starting to change on that, actually, because I've been testing the deck more. It's a deck that I've been very interested in, so I've been putting a lot of time into it. And I've actually got my build to a point where I'm really happy with it. And a lot of those weaknesses that I experienced with the deck, I found some ways to fix those. So I'm sure I'll bring those to the channel here. I have 2 different cooler builds, which I've been liking. I think I'll bring them to the Patreon first, then maybe the channel, so make sure to check that out down in the description. You guys can follow all the competitive articles and deck lists that I post there. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think of the cooler deck down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.